Welcome, so glad to have you. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later in the program, we're going to be talking about inventions. Remember, America used to be the home of inventors? Not so much anymore. We'll find out why. But first, corporate welfare, one of my favorite topics. Ryan McMaken, thank you for joining us. You're a college teacher. You're also an author. You worked with the von Mises Institute a little bit as well, which makes you a serious geek.
That is true. Yes,
right now there's
we're all geeks there.
There's like 5 libertarians going, "Oh my God, that's so cool," and everybody else going, "Eh."
Most people don't know how to pronounce it. But
yeah,
yes.
Why is economics so very boring? Why is it?
Well, it does require
awful?
a lot of logical, step-by-step thinking, and I think that tries people's patience, perhaps.
Rather something a little bit more emotional.
Yes.
Come on, make it sexy for me.
Well, it's also dreary. And these days especially, there's lots of reasons to predict doom.
All right. Well, thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
That's been great. I wanted to talk to you about something that both sides of the political spectrum say they hate, but really both sides love. And it's corporate welfare. We see it throughout government. I really got the crash course when I was elected to the RTD board way back in the Middle Ages. And I got to see that in this agency, which was the 4th largest government in Colorado, it wasn't about moving people, it was about moving money. The push for rail development, the push for housing developments, that people wanted to buy property on the right rail line to make sure that the line went there, that the station was there, so then they could do property deals. I mean, I realized it had nothing to do with our core mission of helping transit-dependent people. It had everything to do with people making money off the system. And I see it now, left, right, middle. We've turned into a government of crony capitalism. Am I off on that?
No, and as the government becomes larger and larger, you have more and more people vying for the resources that the government controls. So it only makes sense that as the budgets get larger and there's more money to be doled out, that more and more people will be trying to get their piece of that money.
Because it's a whole lot easier to get your money from the Congress. All you need to do is get half of the congressmen and the president to agree to give you money than it is to talk to 300 million people and convince them through the marketplace that your product is superior.
Right. You can work a lot to make money by appealing to a large number of consumers, or you can have money distributed the political way. And this is, of course, nothing unique to the U.S. or to modern history. It's age-old, but that's always been the choice. Do you make money by engaging in voluntary exchange with people, or do you make money by forcing them to give money first to the government, and then they get their cut, and then you get some of what's left over? And when you are in a country or a place where huge amounts of money are then taken by force from one group of people, now the government has them, well, where's an easy place, one institution you can go to get a lot of money? Might as well go to the government. That's a little easier than appealing to 100 million consumers.
When I talk about corporate welfare, I kind of feel like those guys who hate pornography, and when you ask them to define it, they go, well, I can't really define it, but I know it when I see it. I find myself in that situation when it comes to corporate welfare. Some cases are really clear-cut. When the government buys out General Motors, that's corporate welfare. We don't let the market do what the market needs to do and let a bad company go bad so that its assets can be gobbled up by other people to use it for more productive means. That's simple. But then there's this whole gray area. I think of the new energy economy, that if we're giving tax credits for Vestas or Abound Solar to have their offices here in Colorado, all right, that's direct corporate welfare. I see that. But then there's all these kind of, when we give a $5,000 credit when you buy a Prius, is that corporate welfare? I think it is. Give me the best definition. Corporate welfare is?
Well, we could say that if the goods are being distributed along political lines rather than through the market, and it is going to a group that has lobbied for those funds, we know it's welfare of some kind. Is it corporate welfare, then it's a case where goods are being distributed along political lines rather than through the market, except in this case, they're going to particular group that we consider to be corporate interests. In this case, say, a particular industry, the green industries, or the healthcare industry or weapons manufacturers, whoever you want to name. Welfare all essentially is the same. It's a case of we're taking from one group and giving to another. It's just corporate welfare, if it's going to a group we don't like usually, is when we call it that. But what are the methods then? How do we know, is this just a tax break that's a good idea, or is this actually corporate welfare?
But even those tax breaks are corporate welfare. I mean, listen, I love big, ugly energy as much as any other evil Republican, but even I will say giving tax breaks to Halliburton or giving Exxon some sort of great deal, that's corporate welfare, and it needs to end. The military, is the military a corporate welfare organization? From what I understand, most big manufacturers of military hardware make sure to have a certain part of every plane built in every state, so that every plane has an impact on every state, and therefore you can't cut this contract. Otherwise, you're going to be hurting the people in your home state, Mr. Senator.
Right. It's extremely important politically that we have a consensus among a large number of the members of Congress, and we do that by making sure that we have different interests spread out in different places, and that sort of thing doesn't happen by accident. And then, of course, in many cases, those places geographically are rewarded later by making sure that bases are then retained in those congressional districts and that the money continues to flow, and that brings in more contractors into that district, brings more jobs, brings more money. So it is a large complex that exists. Now, tax credits, of course, aren't the only thing that we could talk about. And of course, one could make the argument that tax credits, the big problem with tax credits is that they're simply unevenly distributed. Is the home buyer mortgage deduction tax credit a subsidy, or is it a tax credit, right? The question is, that's kind of unclear.
It's still the government choosing the winners and the losers in a marketplace, saying, well,
yes,
if you're a homeowner for the first time, we're going to give you cash. It's a tax credit, but it's cash in your pocket. Therefore, we're going to try to manipulate the market so more people buy these homes. When my home city of Boulder gives credits when you buy energy efficient appliances, and they'll give you $50. Well, that's cash, and it makes me think, well, I'll buy this instead of that, which is great if you own the company or sell the appliance. Am I right to say this is not a left or right kind of issue? I mean, I see it on both sides, and in fact, I think some of the worst corporate welfare whores are guys who wear suits and ties. And they're usually part of the economic development crowd. They love to build crap. I mean, it's just, you go to any city, and there's this infrastructure envy that goes all over, not just roads, but everybody's got to have a brand new stadium, a brand new football field, a brand new airport, a brand new convention center, and of course, to tie it all together, ridiculous trolley cars. And it's all about the guys who get the contracts. Am I wrong?
No, and of course, the sports stadiums are perhaps one of the most notorious cases of this, even though study after study by economists, real studies, not a white paper put together by the Chamber of Commerce, show that it doesn't really benefit the local community in any way. It rearranges how the money is spent within the local community, and it provides some bragging rights for the mayor or whatever politicians were involved, but does it really bring in more money and benefit local businesses? That has never been shown. And in fact, some data shows that it costs the local community money.
But how many times have you heard this, that, we build this stadium. Every dollar we spend in this project is going to bring in $100 or $10 or $1,000, whatever it is, in new business into the community. Therefore, this is not about giving contracts to the contractors or the bond dealers. This is all about bringing in business and jobs.
Well, yet again, that's a case of politics triumphing over the market. The people who are advocating then for that particular use of public monies is saying, we, as the lobbyists in this case, are telling you that this is a better way to spend the money than people out in the marketplace can determine how to spend it. So please extract $100 million from the taxpayers, give it to our particular project, and this will be the right way to spend the money. The wrong way to spend the money would be to let the taxpayers keep that money and spend it on buying stuff for their families or cars or so on. We don't know how they're going to spend that, and we're sure they're going to do the wrong thing. But if you give us the money, then we'll spend it right, and then the city will benefit.
Going back, George W. Bush's administration and that Congress, they really got this into high gear. I mean, it's now into warp speed with Obama, but I got to say, it was awful seeing what George Bush did with cronyism.
Well, and from day one, there was always a lot of that sort of thing going on. 2002, he slapped a tariff on steel when we had a surge in steel imports. And so, well, let's benefit that industry by taxing imports on steel. And of course, it's not that like that just disadvantages the people who are importing steel. It now makes the price of steel higher for all Americans everywhere. So it drives up the price of cars and everything. So every entrepreneur who uses steel now pays more for steel. It all benefits the domestic steel industry. Bush administration apparently didn't have a problem with that sort of thing. And then later on, in order to deal with the bursting of the dot-com bubble, Bush actively encourages then the central bank to essentially push up a new bubble, the housing bubble in this case, through a variety of mechanisms which we could easily describe as another form of corporate welfare. Now, they didn't put it that way, of course. This was providing liquidity to homeowners so that they can get a house. But the effect, of course, was to benefit people involved in that industry, also to benefit the politicians, and to benefit the hedge fund managers and the bond traders and anyone else who benefited from this extra liquidity that became involved. And then, of course, the capstone on all of that was TARP, the 2008 bailouts, the $800 billion that then was put out there to prop up some banks and well-connected institutions.
They said if that didn't happen, our economy could come crashing down.
Well, that's what they always say, is do what we tell you or the earth will fall into the sun is basically the argument. And the taxpayers didn't believe them in this case. 75% or so were estimated to have been against the bailout when they called their members of Congress. Congress didn't care, voted for TARP anyway.
Go figure. Same thing with Obamacare.
And they did it with impunity, by the way. They're not being punished.
It's not just the national stuff. It's also the local stuff. I mean, it is right down to the new energy economy. And I think of something that feels good. Colorado has a 30% renewable mandate, which means that 30% of our electricity needs to come from pinwheels and solar panels, which is a great corporate welfare for those manufacturers. All we did is change a regulation. We didn't actually switch money, but we put in a law that benefits one producer over the other. All right, got less than a minute, so tell me, what do we do about it? I mean, it's hard. Give me the law that says you can't do this. You have to define exactly what this is. So save the world. Tell me, how do we stop this?
It's much too difficult. It's to go through it and try to pick apart which subsidies you're going to get rid of and which you're going to keep going. That's just a near impossible task because you have too many different groups vying to not lose any piece of their cut. The only way that you really can cut down on that is when you just really knock down the overall amount of money that government gets so that it actually has to start cutting budgets, and then you'll start to see a drop in that money spent. But until that happens, you're not going to see any of those programs go away.
Ryan, we'll bring you back when they go away. Actually, we'll do this again soon. Stay tuned.